You think this is your world, don't you? Jonathan Blackwell's voice cut through the hum of the upscale Manhattan restaurant. Sharp, controlled, every syllable dripping with authority, and he leaned back in his high-back chair, his tailored navy suit perfect, watch glinting under the warm chandelier light, expecting a reaction from Sophia Bennett, the quiet waitress who had been moving among the tables with measured efficiency for the past 8 hours, balancing trays and refilling glasses with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to move through a world that rarely noticed her. Yet her emerald eyes met his without flinch or fear, calm and composed, as if his words were nothing more than passing wind. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, her voice even, professional, yet carrying a weight he hadn't anticipated, and Jonathan smirked, assuming she was startled, that momentary pause a token of submission, but she simply adjusted a menu left askew, straightened the silverware, and then looked back at him, her gaze steady, unwavering. "The order for table 7 is slightly off. The guest requested the filet mignon medium rare, not medium well," she added, her tone neutral, almost polite, yet precise enough to imply accountability, and the room seemed to fade around Jonathan as he processed that a single waitress had noticed what he, a man accustomed to commanding entire companies, had overlooked. He chuckled lightly, tapping his platinum card against the table, trying to maintain his superiority. "I thought you were just a waitress. Surely this is beyond your station," he said, the smirk daring her to react, to break composure, to falter, and Sophia didn't. She merely set down the tray of sparkling water and replied, "I aim to do my job correctly, sir. That's all," and then turned away to check on another table, leaving Jonathan momentarily speechless, a flicker of curiosity crossing his usually impenetrable expression. "Interesting," he murmured under his breath, leaning forward, suddenly aware that this wasn't the timid, easily intimidated server he had assumed. As Sophia returned with the correct order for table 7, she moved with the grace of someone who had learned the rhythm of precision, eyes scanning each guest, each plate, each detail, her movements silent, deliberate, yet commanding in their subtle authority. Jonathan observed her closely, the realization dawning that he had underestimated her intelligence, that the quiet composure he had dismissed as ordinary carried an unexpected weight, a power that didn't need to shout to be recognized. The faint curl of her lips as she placed the plates with perfect alignment, the steady lift of her chin, the calm assurance in her posture, all of it coalesced into a presence he hadn't encountered before, a sense of control that was quiet but undeniable. He cleared his throat, attempting to regain the upper hand. "And what else can you manage besides menus and orders, Miss Bennett?" he asked, his voice laced with challenge, and Sophia paused just long enough to meet his gaze before replying. "I manage what I must, sir. The rest is observed." Her words soft yet deliberate, sending a subtle ripple through the room that Jonathan felt but could not name. The hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware, the faint hiss of the espresso machine, all faded into the background as the tension between them built, the invisible line of power shifting imperceptibly. He tried to mask the astonishment creeping into his expression, a slight narrowing of his eyes, a twitch of a smile betraying admiration he would not yet voice, and then, without fanfare, Sophia moved past him, attended to a minor discrepancy with another table, and left a small envelope on his side table, perfectly unobtrusive, yet the embossed seal and neatly folded contents caught his attention immediately. Jonathan's fingers hovered over it, heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and disbelief, as he realized the quiet waitress he had attempted to belittle had orchestrated not only every detail of the service, but now held a secret leverage over him, a control he could feel but could not yet quantify. His eyes followed her as she disappeared toward the kitchen, her every step measured, graceful, and resolute, leaving Jonathan to stare at the envelope, the weight of possibility pressing down on him. The faintest tremor of realization. "Who is she really?" he whispered, the room resuming its normal pace around him. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. The subtle hum of conversation, the flickering chandelier light, the distant clink of glassware, all reminding him that the quiet one, the one he had tried to humiliate, was commanding far more than he had ever imagined. And as he reached for the envelope, fingers brushing the embossed seal, he felt the unmistakable thrill of being caught in a moment, where roles had reversed, where authority had shifted, and where every assumption he had held about intelligence, composure, and power was suddenly being questioned, and the camera would linger on his expression, a mix of shock, curiosity, and respect, the scene fading to the hum of the restaurant, leaving viewers on the edge, knowing this was only the beginning of a story far larger than the dinner service itself. Jonathan Blackwell picked up the envelope slowly, the weight of its contents pressing against the tips of his fingers as if it contained not only paper, but a subtle declaration of control, and he hesitated, watching Sophia Bennett move across the dining floor with unhurried precision, each step measured, each motion graceful, carrying plates and refilling glasses with a quiet authority that contradicted the modest uniform she wore, her emerald eyes scanning the room, noting every detail, every small imperfection in the service. And he realized that in those eyes, there was a calmness he had never seen before, a command that required no volume, no raised voice, no overt assertion, yet it radiated power, and he found himself leaning back again, unsure whether to admire or be unsettled, the murmurs of patrons fading into background noise as his attention narrowed. Sophia paused at a nearby table, observing a minor discrepancy in the silverware alignment, her hands adjusting forks and knives with exacting care, the subtle movement almost theatrical in its perfection, and Jonathan could not take his eyes off her, the realization sinking deeper that the woman he had underestimated, dismissed even, was orchestrating control of the environment without appearing to lead at all, and he thought of every interaction they had had that evening, how she had met his challenge, his smirk, his patronizing tone, with nothing but quiet composure and measured action, each gesture reinforcing her competence, her intelligence, and her subtle dominance. He glanced around the restaurant, noting the slight shifts in posture of the staff as they unconsciously followed her lead. The patrons unaware that a masterful coordination was unfolding just feet from them, and Jonathan's mind raced, connecting dots he had not noticed before. The way she anticipated needs before they were voiced, the way she addressed problems with minimal effort, yet maximum effect, the way she projected confidence without arrogance, and a faint smile touched his lips, a rare acknowledgement of respect forming without a word, and Sophia turned to check on another table, her movements fluid, almost dance-like, each placement of a plate or glass deliberate, a choreography of efficiency that drew a quiet admiration from Jonathan even as he resisted the recognition. He opened the envelope finally, unfolding it carefully, and the document inside revealed not only a partial ownership of the company overseeing the restaurant chain, but also a subtle notation of managerial authority, a quiet reminder that the power he had assumed to wield in this environment was far from absolute. And he felt a sudden shift in perception, his smirk gone, replaced by curiosity tinged with awe, as he absorbed that Sophia Bennett had orchestrated not only the service, but now subtly controlled the framework of his own domain without confrontation, without loud declaration, just through competence and calm. He placed the envelope on the table, fingers lingering on the embossed paper, his eyes following her as she moved toward the kitchen to check on staff, adjusting schedules with a simple nod, coordinating meals and timing with precision that seemed almost invisible to the casual observer. Yet, Jonathan understood immediately that nothing had been left to chance, nothing overlooked, and he felt a mixture of respect and disbelief, the quiet authority of Sophia Bennett pressing against every assumption he had held about hierarchy and control, and for the first time that evening, he was not the one commanding the room. He was merely a witness to it, the clatter of cutlery, the hum of conversation, the low murmur of background music all blending into a soundtrack for the realization that he had underestimated her, that the quiet, composed waitress he had tried to belittle was operating with a strategic mind, a precise eye, and an unspoken authority that could rival his own, and he leaned forward, intrigued, studying her every movement, the way she nodded subtly to a busser, the way she glanced at a reservation book to anticipate a possible error, the way she carried herself with calm dignity, and he thought, finally, that this was only the beginning, that the woman who had appeared so ordinary was anything but, that the envelope, the subtle control, the quiet composure all pointed to a story far larger than a single dinner service. and Jonathan felt a pull, a desire to understand how far her influence extended. As Sophia returned with a glass of water for a patron, paused to adjust a chair, a small, imperceptible correction, yet the effect was immediate, the table more aligned, the service smoother, and he realized fully that she had not only met his challenge but had rewritten the rules of engagement entirely, leaving him silent, reflective, and on the edge of something he did not yet understand. The camera would linger on his face, eyes narrowing slightly in contemplation. A mix of shock, curiosity, and reluctant admiration, the hum of the restaurant filling the void, as viewers waited to see how this quiet authority would continue to unfold. Sophia Bennett moved through the final stretch of the dinner service with effortless control, the soft clink of silverware and the low murmur of patrons forming a backdrop to her precise, deliberate movements. Every gesture measured, every glance scanning the room for potential discrepancies, and Jonathan Blackwell remained seated, watching intently from his table, the envelope before him unopened, a tangible symbol of authority that had quietly shifted from him to her. He noticed how she approached a table where a guest's water glass had been overlooked, gently refilling it with a small, polite smile that carried neither arrogance nor superiority, yet conveyed competence beyond the visible uniform. The patron glanced up, momentarily impressed, unaware of the layers of observation and coordination that Sophia had executed in the previous hour. She moved next to a server adjusting a misaligned chair, whispering a subtle correction. The other employee nodded, her instruction calm but immediately effective. Jonathan's fascination deepened, the earlier smirk replaced by concentrated attention. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, observing her, every motion conveying both grace and command without the need for a raised voice or explicit direction. The restaurant itself seemed to respond to her presence, a rhythm in the air, as if the staff and even the diners were unconsciously attuned to her efficiency and composure. Jonathan's thoughts raced, recalling how he had entered with confidence, ready to assert dominance, to test her limits. Yet here he was, quietly witnessing the exact opposite. The control he had assumed was his by position alone had subtly evaporated under the quiet, unassuming authority of Sophia Bennett. She paused briefly at his table to correct a minor inconsistency in the silverware arrangement, her eyes meeting his with a small, enigmatic smile that suggested awareness without confrontation. He felt a jolt of recognition, a shock to his expectations, and then a slow appreciation began to replace disbelief. Her ability to manage, to organize, to anticipate every need without drawing attention was extraordinary. Jonathan reached for the envelope, fingers tracing the embossed edges, the paper smooth, weighty with implication. He unfolded it, revealing detailed documentation of her partial ownership in the restaurant chain. The lines of text subtle but undeniable, a silent assertion of influence and control, and Jonathan absorbed the quiet revelation, understanding that every move she had made this evening, every correction, every gesture of attentiveness, was not mere courtesy or habitual procedure, but a demonstration of authority exercised with discretion and skill. The realization settled in his mind. The quiet waitress he had underestimated held command not through overt power, but through a combination of intellect, observation, and precise action. Sophia moved to check a table by the window, noticing a misplaced utensil, adjusting it with careful fingers, the light catching the smooth curve of her hand. Jonathan's gaze followed, captivated, the hum of conversation, the faint clatter of plates, and the distant hiss of the espresso machine, fading into the background as his attention narrowed entirely on her, each motion conveying control, confidence, and clarity. And then she turned, approaching the kitchen to oversee the last course being prepared, pausing to give a subtle instruction to a cook, who immediately adjusted a garnish. The seamlessness of her oversight leaving Jonathan speechless. He shifted in his seat, leaning back, mind racing to reconcile the image of the composed, unassuming waitress with the undeniable power he now understood she possessed, a quiet authority that reshaped his assumptions, a presence that demanded respect without uttering a word. The earlier dynamic between them inverted. The one he had sought to humiliate had demonstrated skill, insight, and subtle command that eclipsed the perceived hierarchy. Jonathan exhaled slowly, the edge of tension in his shoulders softening as he considered the implications. The room itself seemed to recognize her influence, the rhythm of service smoother, the interactions more fluid, and he realized fully that Sophia Bennett had quietly mastered the space, the service, and now his perception of power. And as she moved back toward the center of the dining floor to finish her final tasks, Jonathan remained seated, a mix of shock, respect, and curiosity etched across his face. The evening's lessons slowly crystallizing, the quiet efficiency of her presence a revelation. And as Sophia glanced briefly in his direction before attending to the next guest, the subtle, confident smile on her face left him pondering the magnitude of what he had just witnessed, the control she wielded with quiet composure, the calm authority that reshaped his understanding of influence and respect. And the camera would linger on this silent exchange, Jonathan's absorbed expression, the soft movement of Sophia overseeing the room, leaving the audience anticipating the next unfolding of this quiet but undeniable power. Sophia Bennett straightened her apron one last time, glancing over the dining room to ensure every detail aligned perfectly, her hands moving with the quiet confidence of someone who had mastered her environment. And Jonathan Blackwell continued to observe from his table, the soft glow of the chandeliers reflecting off the polished silverware, his expression unreadable but his mind fully engaged. He watched as she approached a table where a minor discrepancy in the seating arrangement had gone unnoticed, her movements deliberate. Almost like a conductor guiding an orchestra, she adjusted a chair without a word, the guests smiling in appreciation, unaware of the subtle authority being exercised. Jonathan leaned back, absorbing the sight, realizing that every aspect of the restaurant, from the timing of orders to the alignment of cutlery, was under her quiet control. The way she communicated with the staff, a simple glance, a nod, a whispered suggestion, was enough to direct the flow of service seamlessly. The hum of the air conditioning and the faint clatter of dishes blended into a background rhythm as Sophia moved from table to table, checking details, anticipating needs before they were spoken, and Jonathan could not look away. The envelope he had set aside earlier seemed heavier now, a reminder of the influence she held. He recalled the moment she had left it on his side table, the embossed paper now representing not just ownership but competence, judgment, and foresight. Sophia paused briefly, meeting his gaze with a small, controlled smile that spoke volumes without words, and in that instant, he felt the full impact of underestimating someone he had assumed to be ordinary. She returned to the central area of the dining floor, supervising the final courses, coordinating with the kitchen with subtle gestures, the way she timed the delivery of plates, the alignment of utensils, the positioning of glasses, all perfectly orchestrated. Jonathan noted the efficiency, the quiet authority, the calm demeanor, and he found himself studying her every move. The realization settling that the waitress he had dismissed had orchestrated control over the entire room, the timing, the flow, and even his perception, without confrontation, without drawing attention, and yet it was undeniable. Sophia stepped back, observing the room with the precision of a strategist, the staff following her unspoken lead, the guests unaware but benefiting from her foresight. Jonathan shifted in his seat, the awe building, the envelope lying on the table a silent testament to her capability. He traced the edges with his fingers, understanding now that her calm composure, intelligence, and subtle execution of authority had inverted the expected power dynamic. Each decision, each movement, each glance, carried weight far beyond the confines of the restaurant. He reflected on the interactions earlier in the evening, how she had met his challenges with unwavering calm, how she had adjusted the flow of service without fanfare, how her presence had imposed respect naturally, effortlessly, and he felt a growing sense of respect mixed with astonishment. Sophia approached a final table, noticing a minor detail with the placement of silverware, correcting it with delicate precision. Jonathan's eyes followed every motion, the quiet control evident in each subtle action, and he realized fully that she had not only managed the logistics but had reshaped his understanding of authority and competence, the environment bending to her influence without her needing to raise her voice or draw attention to her power. He exhaled slowly, processing the inversion, the quiet dominance that had replaced his assumptions. Sophia straightened a napkin on the last table, turned to acknowledge a server with a nod, the gesture efficient, commanding, and the room seemed to move in concert with her quiet guidance. Jonathan's gaze lingered, captivated by the realization that the seemingly ordinary waitress possessed a level of authority and insight that he had never anticipated. He thought of every corporate meeting, every negotiation, every display of power he had conducted over the years, and compared it to the effortless control Sophia had wielded in this single evening. And the awareness struck him. He was witnessing mastery executed without display, influence asserted without volume, and authority claimed through competence and composure alone. Sophia returned to the central area, hands folded lightly in front of her, scanning the room one final time. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, acknowledging silently the lesson he was absorbing, the inversion of power, the demonstration of respect earned, the quiet confidence of someone underestimated. And as she moved to the kitchen, the soft shuffle of her shoes on the hardwood floor marking her departure, Jonathan felt a shift within himself, a subtle acknowledgement of the intelligence, dignity, and control she embodied, the scene lingering in his mind, the hum of conversation, the clinking of dishes, the soft light, all merging to highlight the quiet, undeniable influence Sophia Bennett held over the room. And the camera would capture the contrast of his silent realization and her composed command, setting the stage for what was to unfold next. Sophia Bennett moved into the quiet corner of the restaurant, gathering the remaining receipts and notes from her station, her posture calm, measured, yet carrying the undeniable weight of someone accustomed to managing far more than a dining floor. And Jonathan Blackwell continued to sit at his table, watching, the envelope still lying in front of him, its contents a silent declaration of her subtle authority. He observed how she interacted with the staff, a simple glance, a slight tilt of the head, a barely perceptible gesture, and instantly the team adjusted without a word, moving with fluid efficiency as though they had been rehearsed. Yet there had been no rehearsal, only her presence commanding attention. Jonathan's eyes followed her as she approached a table where a small error had occurred in a wine order. She lifted the glass, tilted it slightly, assessed the pour, then corrected it with the softest motion. The guest noticing only the impeccable service, unaware of the orchestration behind it. He leaned forward, astonishment mingling with admiration, the contrast between her quiet composure and his previous assumptions striking him sharply. He thought of how he had entered the evening fully prepared to assert control, to test boundaries, to humiliate, and yet now he was the observer, caught in the subtle currents of her influence. Sophia moved back toward the center, checking reservations on her tablet, tapping a few keys, coordinating timing with the kitchen and staff, every adjustment minimal but precise, a whisper here, a nod there, and the rhythm of the room responded seamlessly. Jonathan noticed how she handled the smallest details, aligning plates, adjusting silverware, positioning menus, all with calm certainty, and the effect was profound, each action reinforcing the sense that she was entirely in control, commanding respect without raising her voice, without calling attention. A quiet mastery that demanded acknowledgement. He exhaled slowly, the envelope before him a constant reminder that she had not only managed the evening flawlessly, but had exercised authority that subtly overrode his own presence. Sophia turned briefly toward him, her emerald eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment, a small, enigmatic smile curling at the edges of her lips, a silent message passing between them, recognition of competence, intelligence, and the unspoken power she wielded. Jonathan's pulse quickened slightly, the weight of admiration and surprise settling in. He considered every interaction of the night, from her meticulous oversight to her composed corrections, each move reinforcing the lesson he had been learning in quiet increments. The room itself seemed to breathe around her, the staff responding instinctively, the guests perceiving only the polished surface of service. Unaware of the orchestration beneath, he traced the outline of the envelope again, pondering the subtle authority contained within its folds, and how it mirrored the subtlety with which she controlled the environment. Sophia gathered the last orders, confirming details with a nod to the kitchen, a soft instruction to a busser, and moved back to the center to survey the dining floor one final time, the glow of the chandeliers highlighting her calm presence. Jonathan leaned forward, noting the precision of her movements, the quiet command she maintained over every element, the way her actions spoke louder than words, the way her eyes scanned constantly, measuring, assessing, and controlling. The realization deepened. He understood fully that the quiet waitress had orchestrated an evening that redefined authority, that challenged assumptions, that inverted the expected power. Dynamic, and yet she did so with no fanfare, no boast, just skill and composure. The restaurant hummed settling around them, a soft soundtrack to the silent tension. Sophia paused, placing a menu carefully on the last table, straightened a chair, a subtle motion that resonated through the room, as if her presence alone could align the energy of the space. Jonathan watched, captivated, aware that he was witnessing a mastery of influence, intellect, and dignity that had quietly claimed control. He felt a shift inside, a mixture of awe, respect, and anticipation for what would come next. The envelope a reminder of the tangible authority she held. And as she finally moved toward the kitchen, the soft shuffle of her shoes against the hardwood punctuating the air, Jonathan remained seated, absorbing the full weight of the evening, the quiet command, the subtle manipulation of circumstance, and the undeniable presence of Sophia Bennett. And the camera would linger on his expression, the soft lighting catching the furrow of his brow, the deepening respect in his eyes, capturing the moment where the underestimated became the orchestrator, leaving viewers aware that the story was only beginning, and that the quietest figure in the room had already reshaped the rules of power. Sophia Bennett stepped into the dimly lit back corridor, collecting herself for the final sweep of the evening, the faint hum of the kitchen appliances and distant clatter of dishes forming a quiet rhythm that mirrored her measured breathing. Jonathan Blackwell remained at his table, the envelope before him unopened, yet pulsating with significance. He studied her as she moved through the narrow passage, observing staff interactions, adjusting minor details with subtle gestures, a glance, a tilt of the head, a brief nod, and the rhythm of the room responded, the servers aligning seamlessly to her direction without a word. The confidence she exuded was calm, understated, yet utterly commanding. He leaned forward slightly, the soft glow of the chandeliers reflecting off his polished watch, tracing every movement, realizing that each calculated step, each quiet correction, was evidence of a mind not only attentive but strategically controlling the flow of the environment. Sophia paused to review a set of order slips, her fingers gliding across the paper with precision, checking details and anticipating potential errors before they could occur. Jonathan's eyes widened slightly, the weight of the realization settling in, that the waitress he had thought to be ordinary was executing a level of control and oversight that mirrored executive management. She moved back into the dining room, her presence fluid, almost imperceptible, yet the subtle influence she exerted on staff and timing was unmistakable. Patrons continued their meals unaware of the orchestration, yet Jonathan could perceive the invisible threads being pulled with finesse, the flow of service, the timing of courses, the positioning of utensils, all synchronized with quiet authority. He shifted slightly, the admiration growing, the smirk he had worn earlier replaced by a focused attention, a recognition that authority need not be loud to be absolute. Sophia approached a table where a minor inconsistency in the wine service had occurred. She corrected it with a simple tilt of the glass, a flick of the wrist, and a soft word to a server, the guest noticing only the impeccable service, unaware of the layers of control behind it. Jonathan's pulse quickened, the quiet mastery before him challenging every preconception he had about power and influence. He glanced at the envelope again, realizing that the document within represented not only her stake in the company, but a tangible affirmation of the subtle authority she had wielded all evening. Sophia moved to a side station to organize a final set of plates, each placement deliberate, calculated to maintain balance and flow, and Jonathan watched intently, noting how even the smallest adjustments were made with the precision of someone who understood the dynamics of the room far beyond mere service. The air seemed to shift subtly around her, a rhythm imposed without a word, a presence commanding attention while remaining understated. He considered the entire evening, the challenges he had issued, the smirks and tests, and contrasted them with the effortless competence she had displayed. every step, every glance, every quiet gesture contributing to a larger pattern of control. Jonathan felt a stirring of respect and astonishment, the lesson settling deeper that quiet composure combined with intelligence and foresight could overturn assumptions and reshape perception. Sophia straightened a chair, glanced at the reservation book, and coordinated with a server with a single tilt of the head, each action seamless, invisible to the casual observer. Yet Jonathan registered each subtle signal, the accumulation of her authority undeniable. She paused briefly near his table, eyes meeting his for a fraction of a second, a faint, controlled smile conveying awareness and mastery. Jonathan felt the tension of the evening crystallize, the subtle inversion of power fully realized. He exhaled slowly, absorbing the impact. The quiet, competent presence of Sophia Bennett had not only guided the evening flawlessly, but had transformed the room. The energy, and his own understanding of influence. The camera would linger on this silent acknowledgement, capturing Jonathan's absorbed expression and Sophia's composed command, the soft hum of the restaurant enveloping them, leaving the viewer anticipating the continuing story of the quiet authority that had quietly seized the room and reshaped expectations entirely. Sophia Bennett stepped back from the central station, surveying the room one final time, her posture calm, composed, radiating authority without a single raised voice. Jonathan Blackwell remained at his table, envelope unopened but heavy with implication, his eyes tracking her every move, noticing how she adjusted a chair ever so slightly, nodded at a server, and coordinated the timing of the dessert courses with a flick of her hand, the staff responding instantly, almost instinctively, as if attuned to her presence, the rhythm of the restaurant flowing seamlessly under her quiet command. Jonathan leaned forward, realizing fully that the power he had assumed to hold had been subtly eclipsed by the precision and intelligence of the woman he had underestimated. Each gesture, each glance, each adjustment she made, reinforced a mastery that required no declaration, no overt assertion, only calm competence and unwavering focus. He traced the embossed edge of the envelope with his fingers, a symbol of the authority she had quietly exercised all evening. Sophia approached the last occupied table, noting a slight misalignment of utensils, corrected it without disrupting the diners, the movement almost imperceptible. Yet Jonathan observed and registered the impact, the subtle control over the environment, the unseen orchestration, the effortless assertion of competence. He thought back to his initial arrogance, the smirk he had worn when attempting to challenge her, and now he understood the depth of his miscalculation. Sophia moved to the side station to check the remaining receipts and finalize the service, every action deliberate, precise, measured, as if she had choreographed the entire flow of the restaurant in advance. Jonathan felt a mixture of admiration and surprise, the quiet strength and intelligence she exhibited redefining his perception of leadership and authority. She glanced briefly at him, a subtle acknowledgement, a small, knowing smile that conveyed awareness without confrontation. He felt the full weight of that silent exchange, the inversion of expectations, the quiet one he had sought to humble, now demonstrating mastery with effortless composure. Sophia returned to the central floor, observing the staff, giving subtle signals with her eyes and gestures, and the room responded in harmony. Jonathan realized the full extent of her influence, the ability to control the space, the rhythm, and even the perception of those present, without demanding attention, without speaking loudly, just through quiet, intelligent action. He considered the envelope again, understanding that the tangible proof of her stake in the company mirrored the intangible control she had demonstrated. Sophia moved past him, checking on the arrangement of chairs and tables, aligning them with precise care, and Jonathan watched, captivated by the meticulous execution of her authority, the calm, steady confidence, the intelligence behind every subtle movement. He felt a rising respect, a recognition that the lesson of the evening extended far beyond service or etiquette. It was about awareness, mastery, and the quiet assertion of influence. The camera would linger on Jonathan's face, reflecting shock, curiosity, and growing respect, while Sophia continued to move with effortless poise. The soft sounds of the restaurant, the hum of conversation, the clink of silverware, the distant hiss of the espresso machine, blending into a gentle backdrop, emphasizing the quiet but undeniable command she wielded as she paused near the doorway, casting a final, fleeting glance at Jonathan. The subtle expression on her face spoke volumes: intelligence, composure, and understated power, leaving him seated, silent, absorbing the transformation of his understanding, the inversion of expected roles, the quiet but absolute control of Sophia Bennett. And the scene captured the essence of the evening, the unspoken lesson of respect, skill, and authority, leaving the viewer aware that the story was far from over and that this quiet, composed presence had already reshaped everything they thought they knew about influence and command. Sophia Bennett moved toward the back of the dining area, adjusting the final details for the night, her hands steady, her eyes scanning each table with precision, noting subtle imperfections, the slight tilt of a chair, the alignment of cutlery, and the position of glasses, all attended to with quiet authority. Jonathan Blackwell remained seated, leaning slightly forward, his gaze unwavering, absorbing each motion, each choice she made with meticulous care, and he realized that every small correction, every glance, every nod or tilt of her head carried weight. Far beyond the visible task, her presence influencing the rhythm and flow of the room, the staff responding instantly to her subtle cues, patrons unaware yet benefiting from her seamless management. Jonathan's mind traced back to his initial arrogance, the smirk he had worn when thinking to assert control. And now he understood fully that she had not only met every challenge he had anticipated, but had quietly orchestrated the evening with mastery that surpassed his own expectations. Sophia moved to a server adjusting a plate that had been slightly misaligned, her voice soft but deliberate. "Shift it just slightly to the left, please." The server complied immediately, a small nod acknowledging the instruction. Jonathan's eyes followed the motion. Captivated by the effortless command, she returned to the central floor, checking orders, timing courses, coordinating with the kitchen, each motion minimal yet precise. The room moving in harmony with her presence, the soft hum of conversation, the clink of dishes, the distant hiss of the espresso machine, all forming a gentle soundtrack as Jonathan watched, realizing that the quietest, least conspicuous individual in the room held the most influence. He leaned back, letting the weight of the evening settle in, observing how she paused briefly at a table where a minor mistake in a wine order had occurred, corrected it with a subtle tilt of the bottle, a flick of the wrist, and a whispered suggestion to a server, the guest noticing only the perfect service, unaware of the unseen authority at work. Jonathan's pulse quickened as he recognized the skill and intelligence she had employed silently, the envelope before him on the table taking on a new significance, a tangible reminder of her authority and foresight. Sophia moved once more through the dining floor, attending to the final guests, every step deliberate, every gesture controlled, each action reinforcing her command without the need for spectacle or assertion. Jonathan thought of the countless meetings, negotiations, and displays of influence he had orchestrated in his life, comparing them to the quiet precision she exhibited, and he understood the full meaning of competence exercised without overt power. She glanced briefly in his direction, a faint, controlled smile on her lips, a silent acknowledgement that he had witnessed her mastery. Jonathan exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing as respect and admiration took root. Sophia returned to her station to finalize the evening, checking receipts, ensuring every order matched, coordinating a final clean sweep. Jonathan remained seated, eyes following her, understanding that the influence she exerted extended beyond the immediate tasks, shaping perception, command, and authority in subtle yet profound ways. The envelope, the quiet efficiency, the composure, all merging to demonstrate a mastery that was both visible and invisible. Jonathan felt a mixture of awe and humility, realizing that the woman he had underestimated had not only met every expectation but had quietly surpassed them, exerting power with intelligence, grace, and precision. As Sophia moved toward the exit to conclude her shift, Jonathan's gaze lingered on her, the room settling into calm, the soft lights reflecting off polished surfaces, the gentle hum of activity forming a quiet backdrop to the weight of understanding settling within him. And he acknowledged silently the lesson of the evening, that authority and influence could exist quietly, decisively, and without ostentation. Sophia Bennett had orchestrated the night flawlessly, the balance of service, timing, and subtle control complete, leaving Jonathan seated, reflective, and profoundly aware that the quietest presence in the room had claimed the greatest command, the camera capturing the soft interplay of his realization and her composed departure, the gentle sounds of the restaurant punctuating the lingering impression of understated mastery. And the viewers left anticipating the next revelation in this story of quiet authority and intelligent control. Sophia Bennett stepped into the quiet hallway leading to the exit, her movements deliberate, measured, every motion reflecting the calm confidence she had maintained throughout the evening. Jonathan Blackwell remained at his table, leaning forward slightly, the envelope still lying unopened, its presence a silent reminder of the influence she wielded. He watched as she paused briefly to straighten a framed certificate on the wall, a small gesture that conveyed attention to detail and the subtle assertion of authority. The staff continued their tasks seamlessly, responding to cues she had given earlier with a fluidity that seemed almost instinctive. Jonathan noted how her quiet confidence had reshaped the rhythm of the room, each server moving with precise timing, each course arriving without disruption, the patrons enjoying the experience unaware of the orchestration behind it. He considered the sequence of events, the way she had addressed his challenges with composure, intelligence, and foresight, each action reinforcing a mastery that did not need to be announced. Sophia moved to a table near the window, checking the alignment of the menus and silverware, making minor adjustments with calm precision, the guests barely noticing, yet Jonathan observed every detail, the subtle command she exercised becoming more apparent with each passing moment. He recalled the small nod she had given a server earlier, the way she had anticipated every need before it was even voiced, and he realized fully that the quiet waitress he had underestimated had orchestrated the entire flow of the evening with strategic insight. The envelope in front of him representing not just her stake in the company, but a tangible manifestation of the authority she had exercised. Invisibly, Sophia returned to the central floor for one final sweep, her eyes scanning the room, hands folded lightly in front of her, a posture conveying both calm and control. Jonathan's admiration deepened as he recognized the balance of competence and composure she maintained. She moved toward the kitchen, adjusting a small error in a side station, her direction subtle, efficient, and immediately effective. The staff responding seamlessly, and Jonathan could not help but acknowledge the precision with which she managed every element. The quiet orchestration leaving him both impressed and contemplative. He shifted slightly, exhaling slowly, absorbing the lesson that authority and influence could exist without volume, without overt assertion, a power that could quietly command attention and respect. Sophia paused near the doorway, casting a brief glance at Jonathan, a faint, controlled smile suggesting awareness, mastery, and understated command, and he felt the impact of that silent acknowledgement. The inversion of roles, the one he had expected to underestimate and challenge, had demonstrated skill, intelligence, and quiet authority that eclipsed his assumptions. She stepped out of the dining area, the soft shuffle of her shoes on the hardwood floor echoing slightly. Jonathan remained seated, the hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware, the soft ambient lighting of the chandeliers forming a subtle backdrop as he reflected on the evening, the envelope before him still holding the weight of her influence. He thought of the lessons implicit in her composed actions, the balance of awareness, foresight, and skill that had quietly reshaped the perception of power. Sophia Bennett had completed her work with grace and precision. The restaurant returned to calm, the patrons unaware of the orchestration that had occurred. Jonathan absorbed the full extent of her subtle authority, the quiet mastery that had inverted the expected hierarchy, leaving him in a state of awe, respect, and anticipation for what would follow next, the camera lingering on his expression, capturing the moment when comprehension and admiration converged, the soft ambient noises of the restaurant punctuating the scene, emphasizing the profound impact of her quiet command, and the viewers left on edge, understanding that the seemingly ordinary presence had quietly claimed control, and that the story of influence, intelligence, and composure was only beginning to unfold. Sophia Bennett paused by the side station, taking a moment to glance over the entire dining room, her eyes sweeping across the tables, the staff, and the few remaining guests. Noting the subtle details that only someone with acute awareness would perceive, Jonathan Blackwell remained seated, the soft glow of the chandeliers catching his polished watch and the lines of focus on his face. He watched her move with quiet purpose, her hands adjusting a misplaced napkin, her gaze directing a server without a word. The subtle authority she exercised palpable. The room itself seemed to respond to her presence, a rhythm of efficiency and composure that had been established hours earlier now flowing seamlessly. Jonathan reflected on how he had arrived with confidence, intent on testing boundaries, asserting dominance, and perhaps even finding amusement in challenging someone he assumed would yield easily. Yet here he was, quietly observing the mastery of a woman who had managed every detail without drawing attention to herself, every action deliberate, each motion precise. The soft shuffle of her shoes against the hardwood floor punctuating the gentle hum of conversation and the distant clink of silverware. Sophia moved to the back corner to adjust the final orders, speaking briefly and calmly to the cook, who responded instantly. And Jonathan felt the weight of what he was witnessing, the depth of her competence, the quiet power that required no display, the subtle influence she wielded across the entire environment. He thought about the envelope on the table before him, the document within representing more than ownership. It was a symbol of strategic insight, foresight, and control. Sophia returned to the center of the room, checking on a guest who had shifted their chair slightly, straightening it with a gentle hand. The guest unaware, Jonathan noticing every nuance, the calm precision of her movements, the intentionality in her gaze, the mastery over both space and perception. She paused briefly to give a subtle nod to a busser, who responded without hesitation, the small, silent communication creating a seamless flow that would have seemed magical to anyone not observing closely. Jonathan exhaled, realizing that every challenge he had imagined presenting, every smirk, every attempt at control, had been met and quietly surpassed by her intelligence and poise. The evening unfolding under her guidance, the power dynamic subtly inverted. Jonathan leaned forward, fingers resting lightly on the envelope, absorbing the realization that this woman, whom he had underestimated, had orchestrated not just the service, but the rhythm, the perception, and the effectiveness of everyone in the room without ever raising her voice or drawing attention to herself. The hum of the air conditioning, the soft clatter of dishes, the faint murmur of conversation, all blending into a soundtrack for the mastery she exercised effortlessly. Sophia moved to the final table, aligning menus and glasses, adjusting a chair with delicate precision, and Jonathan's gaze followed every motion, the admiration and astonishment growing with each observation. He considered the subtle lesson she had imparted, that influence, intelligence, and command did not require demonstration through volume or force, but through calm, decisive action, foresight, and unwavering composure. Sophia finished her sweep of the room, stepping back to take in the dining area one last time, hands lightly folded, her posture conveying both confidence and grace. Jonathan felt a quiet shift within himself, a deep respect forming as he recognized the extent of her control and understanding. She turned toward the exit, a small, knowing smile brushing her lips, the subtle acknowledgement of the power she held, and Jonathan remained seated, absorbing the entirety of the evening, the inversion of expected roles, the quiet authority that had redefined the room, the envelope a tangible echo of the mastery he had just witnessed, and the camera would linger on his expression, reflecting shock, curiosity, and profound respect, as the soft ambient sounds of the restaurant provided the backdrop for the lingering impression that the quietest presence had claimed the greatest influence, leaving the viewer aware that this story of understated power and intelligence was only beginning, and that Sophia Bennett had quietly reshaped expectations and commanded attention without a single word raised. Sophia Bennett lingered near the side station, checking the final receipts and confirming the completion of each table's service, her hands moving with quiet precision, her eyes scanning the room one last time to ensure that every detail, no matter how small, aligned perfectly. Jonathan Blackwell remained seated at his table, the envelope before him unopened, the soft glow of the chandeliers reflecting off the polished surfaces and the deepening intensity in his gaze as he observed her. He noted the way she adjusted a chair slightly, straightened a menu, and nodded subtly to a server, each movement deliberate, controlled, and instantly effective, the staff responding without a word. The rhythm of the room flowing seamlessly under her silent direction. Jonathan leaned forward, absorbing the lesson unfolding. Before him, the quiet confidence, the subtle authority, the meticulous attention to detail that commanded respect without ever demanding it. Sophia moved toward the central floor, pausing at a table where a guest had shifted their glass slightly. She corrected it with a gentle hand, a faint smile of acknowledgement to the guest who noticed only the perfect service and not the orchestration behind it. Jonathan's admiration deepened as he realized the extent of her skill, the way she managed the space, the staff, and the flow of the evening with intelligence and foresight. She turned toward a server who had momentarily hesitated, offering a small, calm nod that instantly clarified the task, the server responding with quiet efficiency. Jonathan noted the subtlety of her direction, how influence could be exerted without volume or demonstration. Sophia moved back to the backstation, reviewing the final orders and aligning receipts, her eyes scanning for any minor inconsistencies. Jonathan observed her meticulous attention to every detail, the envelope a silent reminder of the authority she wielded, the weight of her subtle control pressing on his awareness. She returned to the center of the dining area, adjusting the alignment of silverware and menus at one final table, each movement precise, deliberate, executed with an ease that suggested mastery. Jonathan's pulse quickened as he recognized the full impact of what he was witnessing. The quiet one he had underestimated had subtly orchestrated the entire evening, commanding attention, respect, and efficiency without overt assertion. Sophia moved toward the exit for a final glance at the dining room, her posture calm, composed, radiating confidence. Jonathan watched her, the soft shuffle of her shoes on the hardwood floor punctuating the gentle hum of conversation, the faint clink of glasses, the distant hiss of the espresso machine, all blending into a backdrop that emphasized the quiet authority she had exercised. He considered how she had responded to every test, every expectation he had imagined, the subtle reversals, the intelligent adjustments, the calm demeanor, and he understood fully that she had orchestrated a performance of competence and control that exceeded all assumptions. Sophia paused briefly to look back at him, a small, knowing smile on her lips, acknowledging the observer who had silently measured her throughout the evening. Jonathan exhaled slowly, the realization of her skill, poise, and understated power settling in, the room itself returning to a gentle rhythm as the last guests finished their meals, the staff moving with coordinated efficiency. Jonathan leaned back, absorbing the lesson, the inversion of expected roles, the quiet dominance that had reshaped the perception of authority. Sophia Bennett had concluded her oversight flawlessly, her quiet mastery leaving Jonathan reflective, astonished, and deeply respectful. And the camera would linger on the soft interplay of his astonished comprehension and her composed command, the subtle background sounds of the restaurant punctuating the moment, leaving the viewers anticipating the next development in the story of intelligence, composure, and understated power that had quietly claimed the room and altered the understanding of influence entirely. Sophia Bennett moved toward the back exit, taking a final, sweeping glance across the dining room, her posture straight, composed, her movements carrying the weight of quiet authority. Jonathan Blackwell remained seated, the envelope before him now pressing against the surface as a reminder of the influence she had wielded. He watched her as she paused by a server arranging the last checks, her eyes scanning every detail, noting the subtle misalignment of silverware, the angle of glasses, the positioning of menus, and correcting them with gentle, precise movements that spoke of both discipline and skill. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, captivated, observing how every small action reinforced her command without a single raised voice, the staff responding immediately to her unspoken cues, the the rhythm of the room flowing seamlessly under her quiet guidance, the hum of conversation, the faint clatter of dishes, and the soft hiss of the espresso machine forming a subtle soundtrack to her orchestration. He thought back to the evening, to the initial moments when he had assumed control, smirking confidently, expecting to test boundaries and perhaps belittle her. Yet now he found himself witnessing mastery executed effortlessly, silently. Sophia moved toward the central floor, pausing briefly to observe the alignment of chairs, adjusting a single napkin with the slightest flick of her fingers. The effect immediate, the space subtly transformed. Jonathan's mind raced as he connected each observation, the way she had anticipated every guest need, corrected errors before they were noticed, and directed the staff with subtle gestures that were at once invisible yet profoundly effective. He exhaled slowly, the admiration growing with every passing second. Sophia returned to the side station to finalize the last receipts, her hands moving methodically, her gaze calm, scanning the room for any overlooked details. Jonathan noted the precision of her movements, the balance of attention and efficiency, and realized that her competence extended far beyond the visible tasks. It had reshaped the energy, the perception, and the effectiveness of the entire dining room. She moved back to the center for one final inspection, her eyes sweeping across the tables, noting any minor misplacement, adjusting a chair, nudging a plate, tilting a glass, all with such subtlety that the patrons noticed only the impeccable service. Jonathan observed closely, the depth of her intelligence and quiet authority settling fully in his mind, the envelope before him, symbolizing not only ownership but the tangible assertion of her capability. She paused to give a subtle nod to a busser who had hesitated for a moment, the gesture instantly clarifying direction, the staff responding immediately. And Jonathan felt the impact of that quiet command, the evening unfolding under her orchestration, the power dynamic inverted without spectacle. Sophia stepped toward the doorway, glancing briefly at Jonathan, a faint, knowing smile brushing her lips, communicating awareness, control, and mastery. He felt the weight of that acknowledgement, the subtle shift of authority fully realized. She moved past him, the soft shuffle of her shoes against the floor echoing faintly. Jonathan remained seated, absorbing the totality of the evening, the inversion of expectation, the quiet influence she had exerted with intelligence, poise, and strategic foresight, the room returning to calm, the staff moving in coordinated efficiency, the patrons unaware of the orchestration behind the seamless service. Jonathan's mind traced the lessons of the night, understanding that authority and influence could be exercised quietly, decisively, and effectively without ostentation. Sophia Bennett had completed the evening with flawless execution, each small gesture, each deliberate motion contributing to a mastery that reshaped perception and commanded respect without a single raised voice. He exhaled, a slow acknowledgement of the impact she had created, the envelope before him now carrying the weight of understanding. Sophia glanced back one final time, her presence still radiating calm power. Jonathan leaned back, reflective, astonished, and profoundly respectful, the camera lingering on his expression, the gentle ambient sounds of the restaurant emphasizing the quiet authority she had exercised throughout the night, leaving the viewers aware that the story of intelligence, composure, and understated mastery was still unfolding, and that the quietest, most unassuming presence had quietly claimed the greatest influence and reshaped every expectation in the room. Sophia Bennett stepped out into the cool night air, the soft glow of the streetlights reflecting on the quiet pavement as she walked with measured steps, the weight of the evening settling into a gentle calm within her. Jonathan Blackwell remained inside the restaurant for a moment longer, the envelope still in front of him, but now it carried a sense of resolution rather than surprise. He watched her leave, the memory of her composure, intelligence, and subtle authority lingering like a soft echo. He rose slowly from his chair, moving to the large windows overlooking the street, reflecting on the lessons of the night, the inversion of expected power, and the quiet dignity with which Sophia had conducted herself. Every small gesture, every precise action had carried weight beyond her title, beyond her uniform, the way she had managed the room, the staff, the flow of service, and even his perception of authority without ever asserting dominance openly. He allowed himself to smile softly, a mix of humility and admiration settling over him. The hum of the restaurant now serene, the final patrons leaving with satisfied expressions, the staff moving efficiently but relaxed, the sense of accomplishment tangible yet understated. Jonathan thought of all the times he had relied on position, wealth, and intimidation to command attention, and how tonight, all of those tools had been quietly rendered secondary to intelligence, foresight, and calm composure. Sophia Bennett had reminded him that true authority is recognized through respect, not asserted through fear. He traced the edge of the envelope again, feeling the quiet power it represented, and he understood fully that the evening had not only been about service, or tests, or subtle displays of competence. It had been about a demonstration of quiet dignity, a lesson in humility, and the emotional justice that comes from recognizing the value of someone underestimated. The soft clink of the final glasses being cleared and the distant echo of the last chairs being pushed back created a rhythm of closure, a sense that the room, and perhaps Jonathan himself, had been quietly healed and reset by the events that had unfolded. Sophia Bennett's silhouette disappeared around the corner, leaving only the impression of her calm mastery and the silent impact she had made on the space and on Jonathan. He exhaled slowly, the tension of the evening dissolving into a profound sense of respect, the quiet dignity she had carried becoming a lingering lesson in observation, patience, and understated authority. He allowed himself a final glance at the envelope, a tangible acknowledgement of the competence and foresight that had guided the evening. The soft ambient lights of the restaurant casting gentle reflections on the polished surfaces, the room now quiet, but still carrying the resonance of the mastery that had transpired. Jonathan stepped toward the door, his thoughts absorbed in reflection, the lessons of humility, perception, and respect settling deep within him. And as he opened the door to the night, he could feel the emotional payoff of the evening, the quiet triumph of Sophia Bennett, the acknowledgement of talent and authority that had gone unseen by most, a gentle reminder that influence and respect do not need volume to be powerful. The camera would linger on the empty dining room, the polished tables, the soft lighting, the subtle echoes of movement, capturing the calm conclusion of a story where intelligence, composure, and quiet dignity had quietly claimed victory, leaving the audience with a sense of emotional resolution, a deep appreciation for understated mastery, and a lingering inspiration. And if this story touched your heart or made you reflect on the quiet strength in the people around you, share your thoughts below. Let us know how it made you feel. And subscribe to continue exploring these moments of subtle power and human dignity together.